So in this tutorial, we're going to look at a few different techniques. I'm here in just a brand new project. And the first is that we are going to be moving into virtual reality. So there's a few things that we need to do to prepare for that. Now, previously, we would have to go through and custom code a whole bunch of components and scripts to make that work. One of the things that we start with is our player start here. We would replace that with our own kind of player that we would tell the game to inhabit so that we can use virtual reality. When Unreal first came out and we started working with this stuff, it took hours to set up. Now it's much easier. In the content browser, you can just go to Add New, and go to Add Feature or Content Pack, and then click Virtual Reality. When we add this to the project, you'll see some new things come in, and then we're thrown into a subdirectory here. So let's jump back to Content, and we'll close this. Here we have some geometry. This is the meshes and models of VR. There's some VR componentry in here, and what we're really interested in is the virtual reality blueprints. So if I open the blueprints folder, you can see there's some items in here, one of which is the motion controller pawn. If I double click the motion controller pawn, I can actually look at it, I can inspect it. And much like using Grasshopper for Rhino 3D, there are all kinds of nodes and widgets and things that make this work. We don't have to do any editing to this. I can actually close this. All of that stuff, all of that coding is embedded right into this motion controller pawn, which we'll put out on the scene. You can see it looks like a camera, and in fact it is. This camera is tracked to where your headset is in three-dimensional space. Similarly, it will use some geometry here. These are the meshes. Actually, nope. Let's see, mannequins, animations. It uses these hands to depict where our hands are tracked in 3D space. So that, one more time, is virtual reality blueprints, and then the motion controller pawn. I drag and drop that into the scene, and I get this. Once I have that selected, you can see here on the right, under the details, that auto possess player is set to disabled. I'm going to change that to player 0. Player 0 is the character that you are within the virtual reality game. And because we want to inhabit this, we're going to possess this once we start VR, I'm going to delete the player start. There's no reason to have both. So that's all we need to do, and if I were to go up and be in virtual reality, I could jump in and test this out. One part of this component is a component that lets us teleport. It lets us kind of target with our hands different regions in the scene and then jump to those regions. But right now, although we have some geometry in the scene, we're unable to teleport to anything because there's no known collision points. To generate those collisions, I'm going to use what's called a nav mesh bounds. So here I'll type for nav mesh bounds volume, and I'll drag this into my scene. Here you can see by default the green area represents a zone in which there is a collision and we can teleport. And I can see that by pressing P. So turning that on, this nav mesh bounds is something that I can grow and change. But really, we're going to be looking to use some of the geometry that we bring into the scene, and we may have to set up custom components within that. So I'm going to go up to Datasmith, and on my desktop, I've created some steps. So I'll bring these in, and I'll say OK. And these steps now are something that I'd want to be able to teleport to. So you can see that although they're within the nav mesh bounds, they're not interacting in any way that we could actually move to them. So let's go and look at their settings. So I'm going to take this top stair here, and in its details, we can edit its mesh information. So double-clicking the mesh editor here, it brings me to this. What I can see in here is the collisions. There's simple collisions and complex collisions, and you can see there's just a faint outline here. In fact, with this volume, there may be no simple collisions at all. It's only complex. So if we look at this in our 3D space here, it's not interacting with our nav mesh bounds. But if I come down in the information within the mesh editor, I'm going to go and tell the collision complexity to use the complex collisions as simple collisions. And when I do that, you can see now there's a small area that I would be able to teleport to. So I'll save this, and because I only have a few of them, I'll just do that on each of these. So I'll edit this one under collisions, complex is simple, save. This one here, edit the mesh. Collisions, use complex as simple. We'll make sure that this one has complex collisions as part of it. Save that. And you can see that there. It looks like I may have missed this one somehow. Use complex collisions as simple. Let's look at its complex collisions. Save. So I should be seeing that there. But we'll just finish up the last one. The other thing you'll notice is that it actually, if the height is right, you're not able to teleport underneath certain objects. So we need to be careful on kind of the spaces we create and how these collisions work. So here, the last one, there we go. We'll say save. And this way I'll be able to teleport up on top of each of these steps. I just have to target that right area. One last thing to look at with these navigations, you can see that this one's missing, even though those collisions were set up correctly. And if I look at my nav mesh bounds here in the world outliner, I can also see that there's a recast element. This is how those kind of green spaces are created. And under this, I can see that the cell size is set to 11. If I reduce this to, say, 3, I get a much more closely approximated path, right? And I can also look and increase or decrease the agent radius. So this lets it get a little bit bigger. And if I really wanted to, I could reduce the height. And what that should do, let's see, let's go even less. Maybe more. Oh, that's just moving the height of the offset. That's not a big deal. Agent height here, I think if I reduce this down, there we go. By reducing the agent height, I'm able to get teleportation underneath certain elements. So this is too small to teleport to, which is fine. But if I really wanted to, I could teleport underneath this one. So that's all controlled under the recast. So that's our first part, setting up the teleportation and collisions needed to use VR and move through the space. In the next tutorial, we're going to look at how we set up interaction using box triggers. That's coming next.